I only meant to tease her when I said, "You're trouble." But the way she smiled, calm, certain, a little dangerous, I knew right then I wasn't warning her. I was warning myself. The first time I saw her, I almost missed it. That quiet pull some people carry, the kind that doesn't shout for attention but draws it all the same. The art studio wasn't particularly lively that evening. A handful of people moved between easels and wine glasses, chatting in soft tones. Yet somehow, every sound faded when she laughed. She was standing near a painting of a storm, something dark and beautiful, all motion and light. Her hair fell just to her shoulders, a few strands escaping the neatness of her bun. When she turned to look at me, there was no effort in her gaze, no performance. Just a calm, direct curiosity that made me forget what I'd come there for. A friend introduced us. I don't even remember what he said. All I recall is her handshake, warm, steady, the faint scent of citrus on her skin. Her name fit her, graceful, a little old-fashioned, like it had seen more of life than mine ever would. We talked about nothing and everything, how people paint their moods, how silence feels heavier in crowded rooms, how some art isn't meant to be understood, only felt. I made a small joke, something harmless. "You look like trouble." That's when she smiled. Not the polite kind of smile people wear in conversation, but one that said she knew exactly what I meant, and didn't mind it. "The best kind, isn't it?" she said, voice low, teasing. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. The way she said it wasn't flirtatious, not exactly. It was confident, knowing, as if she was letting me in on a secret. There was a spark in her eyes, something playful wrapped around quiet melancholy, a contradiction that drew me closer instead of warning me away. I tried to laugh it off, but her gaze held mine a heartbeat too long. I could feel the warmth of the room shift, or maybe it was just me. Around us, people moved, glasses clinked, laughter rose and fell, but all I saw was her. The soft lines near her eyes when she smiled, the way she tilted her head slightly when she listened. Later, when she showed me how to hold the brush, her hand brushed mine. Light, unintentional, but enough to make my chest tighten. I noticed the way her bracelets clicked softly as she moved, the faint scent of paint and perfume mixing in the air between us. When the evening ended, she thanked me for coming, her tone casual. But the moment I turned to leave, she said, "You should come by tomorrow. We're finishing this piece." I nodded, pretending it was nothing. But walking out into the cool night, her words replayed in my mind. "The best kind, isn't it?" And that's when I realized I wasn't sure if she was trouble or if I was about to be. I told myself I went back the next day to help clean up. Truth was, I just wanted to see if she'd remember me. The studio looked different in daylight, quieter, softer. The late afternoon sun poured through tall windows, making the dust in the air shimmer like tiny floating sparks. She was there, crouched by a half-finished canvas, hair tied back, brush in hand. When she looked up and smiled, something in my chest eased and tightened all at once. "You came back," she said, not surprised, just amused. I shrugged, pretending it was casual. "You said you needed help." She smirked. "I said we were finishing the piece. I never mentioned help." But she handed me a clean rag anyway, her fingers grazing mine. Soft, cool, deliberate in their slowness. The air felt heavy for a moment. She broke it by laughing quietly and nodding toward the tables. "You can start with those." We worked side by side, her humming under her breath, a tune I couldn't quite place. Between small tasks and shared silences, the tension that had hovered between us the night before settled into something gentler. We talked, not about anything that mattered, not yet. But her voice carried the kind of steadiness I didn't realize I'd been craving. She told me she used to teach before she started painting full-time. I told her I was still figuring things out, work, direction, life in general. "You're young," she said softly, almost to herself. "You have time to get lost." There was something in her tone, wistful, maybe a little sad, that made me glance up. Her eyes were on the window, not me. Sunlight lit her profile, the faint lines at the corners of her eyes, the curve of her lips that seemed caught between memory and silence. When she noticed me looking, she smiled again. Not the playful one from last night, but smaller, gentler. "Sorry," she said. "I tend to drift sometimes." "I don't mind," I said. "It suits you." She raised an eyebrow. "Drifting? Being somewhere else but still here." That earned me a quiet laugh, the kind that lingers longer than it should. Later, when she poured coffee into two mismatched mugs, her hand brushed my wrist. It wasn't long, just a second of skin on skin, but it carried warmth that stayed. "Thank you," she said, voice low, eyes meeting mine, "for coming back." For a moment, the world outside the studio didn't exist. No sounds but our breathing. No light but the soft gold fading across the walls. I didn't realize until I left that I'd been smiling the entire walk home. It wasn't just her beauty that stayed with me. It was the calm she carried, the way she made the simplest things feel like they meant something. And somewhere deep down, I knew this wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was the start of something I wasn't ready to name. By the third week, her studio felt more like a rhythm than a place. The scent of oil paint and wood polish had become familiar, the soft creak of the floorboards almost comforting. I told myself I was helping her. Moving canvases, cleaning brushes, adjusting lights, but every task became an excuse to stay a little longer. That afternoon, she stood by the window, a faint breeze lifting a few loose strands of hair as she studied one of her half-finished pieces. I'd never seen anyone look at something the way she looked at her work, as if it was alive, and she was listening for its pulse. "Do you ever stop thinking?" I asked. She smiled without turning. "Only when I paint, or when someone distracts me." I didn't say anything, but she must have heard the quiet shift in my breath, because she added, "And right now, you're a little distracting." The words landed softly, but they hung in the air like a note that refused to fade. I caught her reflection in the window, the curve of her smile, the faint flush on her cheeks. I moved closer, careful, as if the floor between us were fragile. "Then maybe I should give you space," I said, my voice lower than I meant. Her eyes met mine in the glass. "Maybe," she whispered, "but you won't." And she was right. I didn't. We worked like that for hours, close enough to feel each other's presence, far enough to pretend it didn't matter. Sometimes our hands brushed when reaching for the same brush, and every time, she'd freeze for a heartbeat before stepping back, murmuring something about focus. Once, I reached past her to fix the angle of a lamp. My shoulder brushed against her back. Just a second, barely anything, but she stopped breathing. I did too. The air between us changed, thick with everything neither of us dared to name. She turned slowly, her face inches from mine. "Careful," she said softly, her voice steady but her eyes uncertain. "Why?" I asked. Her lips parted as if to answer, then closed again. She only shook her head and stepped away, the distance between us suddenly colder than before. After that, she grew quieter. Her laughter didn't come as easily, and when I tried to catch her gaze, she looked past me instead. I told myself it was for the best, that lines existed for a reason. But the more I tried to respect them, the more I wanted to cross them. As I packed up to leave, she finally spoke. "You shouldn't be here this often," she said, not unkindly. "Do you want me to stop coming?" She hesitated, the silence stretched long enough to feel like an answer. Then, softly, "That's not what I said." And as I walked out, I realized that every boundary she drew only made me want to understand her more. Not to break the line, but to know what she was protecting behind it. The night of the small exhibit felt different, quieter, almost suspended in time. The city hummed softly outside the tall windows, but inside, everything moved in slow motion. Low conversations, glasses clinking, jazz murmuring from a distant speaker. She stood by the entrance, dressed simply. Black dress, hair loosely pinned. But there was something about her presence that made the whole room shift around her. When she saw me, her expression softened, the faintest smile finding its way through her usual calm. "You came," she said. "You invited me," I reminded her. "I didn't think you'd show." I wanted to tell her I would always show, but the words felt too heavy for the moment. Instead, I just smiled, and that seemed to be enough. We spent most of the evening orbiting each other, close enough to feel the warmth of being near, but never close enough to touch. Every time our eyes met across the room, there was that same question lingering. What are we doing? When the crowd thinned and the music softened, she slipped outside for air. I followed a few minutes later, pretending it was coincidence. The night was cool, the street wet from an earlier rain. She was leaning against the brick wall, her arms folded, head tilted back toward the dim glow of a streetlight. You shouldn't be out here alone, I said. She smiled faintly. You think I'm fragile? No, I said. I think you're pretending not to be. That made her laugh. A quiet, unguarded sound that felt like a secret. You notice too much, she said. Maybe I just notice you. Her laughter faded, replaced by a silence that pressed against my chest. She turned to face me then, eyes softer, voice lower. You really shouldn't look at me like that. I wanted to ask how I was looking at her, but I already knew. I could feel it, the way my gaze lingered too long, the way every word between us seemed to carry a double meaning. She began, then stopped, exhaling a shaky breath. People assume I have everything figured out. They don't see how lonely it gets. There it was, the truth she never said aloud in the studio, now hanging between us like the night air itself. I wanted to tell her she wasn't alone, that I understood, but she looked up at me with that same gentle smile from the first day, the one that hid more than it revealed. You're sweet, she said softly, almost apologetic. Don't be. Her words landed heavier than I expected. We stood there for another minute, just breathing, close but untouching, the kind of closeness that hurts more than distance ever could. Then she pulled my jacket around her shoulders, murmured a quiet thank you, and walked back inside before I could find anything worth saying. That night, I realized it wasn't the moment to confess. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Because sometimes silence says what words never should. For days after the exhibit, the studio lights stayed off. Her texts, the short, teasing ones she used to send, stopped coming. The quiet stretched between us like fog, soft but impenetrable. I told myself to give her space. But the truth was, I didn't know what to do with the emptiness she left behind. Every corner of my apartment felt too still. Every late afternoon, that hour when the light would fall just right across her studio floor, carried her absence like a sound I could still almost hear. When I finally went back, I half expected her not to be there. But she was, standing by the window again, back to me, painting in slow, careful strokes. The smell of turpentine hung in the air, familiar yet distant. She didn't turn right away. You shouldn't sneak up on people, she said, her tone light but her brush trembling slightly in her hand. I wasn't sneaking, I replied. Just checking in. She nodded once, still painting. You didn't need to. The words stung more than I wanted to admit. I wasn't sure if I should come. Then maybe you shouldn't have, she said, then sighed softly, setting her brush down. I didn't mean that how it sounded. She turned then, and I saw it, the tiredness in her eyes, the faint shadow of something she was trying not to show. You make it too easy to forget what this is, she said. You're young, and Don't, I interrupted gently. Don't turn this into something small just because it scares you. Her gaze faltered. It doesn't scare me, she said, but her voice betrayed her. We stood there, silence pulling us tight and apart at the same time. When she finally moved, it was to pour 2 cups of coffee, her hands steady but her expression unreadable. Here, she said, handing me one. It's just coffee. That's all. Our fingers brushed as she passed me the mug. A touch so small, yet it felt like the only real thing left between us. Kiddo, she said suddenly, forcing a smile. You need to stop looking at me like that. The word kiddo hit harder than I expected. It was her way of putting distance between us, of reminding me what she wanted me to forget. I didn't argue. I just nodded and let the silence fill the space. When I finally handed her a folded note with my number, not because she didn't already have it, but because I didn't know how else to say I still want to be here, her fingers trembled as she took it. She didn't promise to call. She just said softly, "Take care, okay?" And that was the moment I realized, love doesn't always vanish with goodbye. Sometimes it lingers in the air, half painted on a canvas that no one's brave enough to finish. As I left, the sound of rain began against the windows again, gentle, rhythmic, just enough to hide the quiet breaking of something I didn't know how to let go of. It was almost closing time when I found the courage to return. I hadn't planned to. My feet just carried me there, to the familiar door, the warm glow bleeding through the frosted glass, the faint hum of old music playing somewhere inside. She was alone. The studio lights cast a golden haze across her shoulders, catching the tiny flecks of paint on her hands. Her hair was loosely tied, a few strands falling forward as she cleaned her brushes in slow, absent motions. When she saw me, she froze. Not startled, just unprepared. "You're late," she said after a long pause, her tone somewhere between relief and resignation. "I wasn't sure you wanted to see me," I said quietly. She let out a soft laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "I don't know what I want anymore." I stepped closer. The air was thick with the scent of turpentine and rain. I could hear her breathing, slow, uneven. "I miss you," I said. "That's all I know." Her hand stilled mid-motion, the brush slipping from her fingers and landing in the rinse jar with a dull splash. She looked up at me, really looked, for the first time in weeks, the kind of look that strips away every pretense. "You shouldn't," she whispered. "You're supposed to be out there, finding your life, not getting caught in mine." "Maybe my life led me here," I said. "Maybe that's not a mistake." She turned away, pressing her palms against the table, shoulders tense. "You have no idea what you're doing to me," she said softly. Her voice cracked on the last word, like it was something she'd been holding back too long. I took another step. "Then tell me," I said, "because I don't either." She closed her eyes, took a shaky breath, and for a moment, I thought she'd push me away again. But instead, she turned. Her expression had changed. Not guarded, not careful, just raw. When she reached out, her hand trembled slightly as it brushed against my chest, resting there like a question she wasn't sure she should ask. Her fingers lingered, tracing the edge of my shirt before pulling back just enough to leave warmth in their wake. "I've tried so hard not to care," she said. "You make it impossible." I didn't move. I didn't speak. The world outside felt far away, only the soft patter of rain against the window, the faint clink of brushes in water, and her pulse quickening under her skin. The silence between us wasn't empty anymore. It was full of everything we tried not to say. Then, almost as if afraid of what might happen next, she took a step back, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please, just go before I forget why I should stop you." But I didn't move. Neither did she. And in that fragile stillness, that trembling space between restraint and surrender, I saw it. She wasn't pretending anymore. Not with her words. Not with her eyes. Not with the hand that still hovered close enough to feel my heartbeat. A few weeks passed after that night. No messages, no visits, just time doing what time does best. Testing whether silence means peace or regret. I tried to convince myself it was over, that whatever we were had simply slipped into memory. But some people leave traces that time doesn't erase. It only softens the edges. It was a Sunday evening when I saw her again. The studio door was open, light spilling onto the wet pavement. She was standing by the window, same as always, her hands stained faintly with paint. Something about it, the calm, the familiarity, made my chest ache. She turned when I stepped inside. No surprise, no sharp intake of breath this time. Just that small, knowing smile. "You don't give up easily, do you?" "Not when it feels right," I said. She shook her head, half amused, half resigned. "You still think this is right?" "I think—" I hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Some things don't have to make sense to be right." That made her laugh. The real kind, soft and unguarded. She walked closer, wiping her hands on a rag. The faint smell of linseed oil and rain wrapped around her like something familiar. "I finished the piece," she said, nodding toward the easel. It was the same painting she'd started the day we met, the storm. Only now the light had broken through the clouds. The whole canvas seemed alive, trembling with quiet energy. "It's different," I said. "So am I," she replied. For a long moment we just stood there, side by side, watching the painting in silence. It felt like everything we hadn't said was already there, layered in color and brushstrokes, hidden but present. Finally, she turned to me, her eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. "You remember what you said that first day?" I nodded. "That your trouble." She smiled, slow, deliberate, that same dangerous calm from the beginning. "And I told you I'm the best kind." I met her gaze, steady now. "You were right." This time I didn't hesitate. I reached out and took her hand, not as a question but an answer. Her fingers tightened around mine, gentle but sure. The warmth of her skin spread through me, grounding, real. No fireworks, no music swelling in the background. Just the sound of rain outside, the faint hum of the city, and the quiet rhythm of two people who'd finally stopped running from what was always there. She leaned against my shoulder, and I felt her exhale, that soft, steady kind of breath that only comes when someone finally lets go. "I don't know where this goes," she murmured. "Neither do I said. "But I know I don't want it to end here." Her thumb brushed over my hand, a small, grounding gesture. "Then don't let it." We stayed like that, no labels, no promises. Just warmth, stillness, and the faint echo of our first exchange. "Your trouble?" I whispered again, smiling. She tilted her head, eyes glinting with quiet joy. "The best kind, isn't it?" And for once I didn't answer. I just held her hand tighter, knowing some truths don't need words. They only need time.